Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're actually talking about the Mauser system and the 8mm Mauser bullet. We're going to try to do all this in one video. Hopefully, it all works out, and hopefully, you all enjoy it because I enjoyed making the M43 bullet, the history of the 7.62 by 39. I enjoyed making that video, so let's try to do this. So we're going to break this out into three sections. First, we're going to talk about the gun, and then we're going to talk about the bullet. So the gun today is the G98, which is actually being represented by a Turkish Mauser manufactured in 1937 from the Ankara Armory. And this is actually my personal rifle. I bought this when I was 18, freshly graduated out, or about to graduate out of high school, and it's been a journey with it. We had to fix the firing pin, we had to fix sight, but again, for $175, you can't beat it. Now I know normally Grand Thumb likes to go tip to butt. I'm a little different because tip to butt sounds a little too Navy-ish for me. But so here we have our stereotypical Mauser buttstock. It's got a little hole here, and for those who don't know, this hole actually serves a purpose. It helps aid in taking apart the firing pin system, which we'll get to in a minute. Moving from there, we have the comfortable pistol grip, which again, one of the reasons I chose this rifle is because this is actually one of the most comfortable grips of any mil-serp rifle you can find. Again, that's up to interpretation. At least for me, it is. Some of you I know love your Lee Enfields and your Springfields, but who's to blame? The trigger mechanism here is a stereotypical. It's pretty standard, 3-pound, maybe 2-pound trigger pull. Once the gun is in battery, it's not too bad. Actually, no complaints there, because you have to keep in mind on these bolt guns, the only thing the firing pin, or the only thing the trigger is doing is moving the firing pin back as you pull the bolt into, as you charge the bolt into battery. So it's as soon as you pull the trigger. Here, just to show clear, there's nothing in here. Just to give an example, once you do that, you cannot, we'll do this together. Once you do that, and you hold it down, you cannot activate the firing pin, because all the trigger does is engage the firing pin on these bolt guns. There's no fancy hammer or anything like that. Actually, technically, all these bolt actions are striker fire. So, moving from there, let's talk about the bolt a little bit. The bolt is your stereotypical Mauser 98 style bolt, which went on to influence other rifles such as the Springfield, the Remington. Most of those have their origins in this type of bolt system. They've been simplified over the years, but they're mechanically about the same. It's essentially a rotating bolt as you bring it forward and all that jazz. Moving from there, we'll look at the chamber here. Again, the chamber's stupid simple, stupid easy, and it actually, one of the things that was different was that it allowed for double stacking, which the bullets naturally want to do anyway because they are round. So it just added an extra simple step here. Fun little note, a lot of the variants of the Mauser bolt actions had this little notch cut into them because they were originally chambered in a different cartridge. A lot of them were either chambered in 7.62 by 53, or they were chambered in the original M88 that this bullet replaced in 1903. But we'll get into that in a minute. But it's just a little fun little thing you'll see there. Moving to the sight, you can see here that it is a very audacious sight. Like, they're expecting you to shoot at 2,000 yards. But in all actuality, that's not too hard, because when these rifles were designed, they were designed in the time where trench warfare was the king of the crop. That's what every nation prepared to fight in, and in doing so, you never knew how far away the other trench was. So they expected their riflemen to be able to hit a target at that length, at that yardage. So nothing too major here. I know Call of Duty and Battlefield will make you believe that you could add optics pretty easy to this. You cannot. Actually, in some variants of the Mauser in other countries, I believe it was both Yugo and Germany, in order to get a scoped version, it was actually a different designation during World War I and going into World War II. Moving down, there's not much to talk about throughout here. I believe it's a 26-inch barrel. I've never taken the tape to it, but I believe 26 is right. And again, it's a long boy. Actually, one of the variants that came after World War I in these captured G98s, a lot of them were converted to 20-gauge shotguns, ironically enough. But here you can see where it was laser etched to come into the country. Product of Turkey, gives all the fun stats, information and stuff. But you see we have a bayonet lug here. I have a bayonet. This is a German World War I bayonet with a World War II frog on it. Yes, I know it's not period correct, but I needed something to hang it on, so I had that. And here you can see a World War I German bayonet. I believe this was manufactured in 1918. It was one of the last things manufactured, and this looks rough. This is seen. The chances that this thing killed somebody is very high. We're not going to dwell on that too much. But here, I'll show you the method of operation for this. Pretty typical bayonet. You have your bayonet lug here that locks into here with the button and a little loop. And because this is a Turkish Mauser, not a German Mauser, there is a little bit of a slight difference, literally a small difference. But outside of that, you're ready for when the whistle blows and you're going over the top. Now, I know this is a World War II rifle, and I'm talking about it in a World War I context because the G98's claim to fame was during the Boxer Rebellion, World War I, and some of the other territorial disputes that Germany had in Africa. But this is also the most truest form you can find because after the war, a lot of them were sporterized. After World War I, many of the German G98 rifles got sent to other countries, remade, redistributed, or they were sent back into German archives and would eventually see action again later on in the 1940s as Berlin is collapsing. There's many documented accounts of people using this bolt, using a original G98, not the Car 98, which Car 98 stands for Carabiner 98, which it's very similar bolt, actually almost identical bolt system. Just the rifle or the barrel was dropped to 22 inches. And typical with most German things, you don't see this wood here. This was kind of a feature added on by other countries, was the this little wood part here, which this actually makes sense to me. The Germans did not add one, so if you see a German G98 or a Car 98K, you see that it does not have the wood here, which to me that's a pretty vital point because your thumb goes here depending on how you hold this thing, or if you're carrying it, and if the barrel gets hot, you would want as much protection from that as possible. Something I'm surprised that the Germans didn't think about. But many of the variants have that difference, and a lot of the variants stuck with the straight bolt. Some of them later on, like during the war, would twist the bolt down. But some of my favorite variants to talk about that I don't have with me yet, I'm looking for some, but if you know anybody, let me know. I would love to have a Persian Mauser. It's essentially the same as the Spanish Mauser, except the Spanish Mauser was chambered in 7mm Mauser, The Persian Mauser was chambered in 8mm Mauser, because with it being so close to Turkey and Egypt and all these other countries that were using a similar rifle, it only made sense for them to have a similar cartridge. Which, with that said, let's transfer to the cartridge. Now that we got everything settled back into its respective spots, let's discuss bullets. So, as I briefly mentioned, the 8mm Mauser round was developed and issued into the German military in 1903, and it gained immediate success. So, because for one, it ballistically was good. It hit hard and it hit fast. It was the round it replaced was really a. I've heard mixed things. I know some people that shoot original ammo and they say, oh, it's actually good. And the original round was actually great for hunting because it had its own way of splintering and creating a form of a hollow point, but it was a solid ball. But what it didn't have was, here we have a 8mm bullet here. What it didn't have was this point. It was rounded off and it looked like a big tube, if you want to imagine it that way. I wish I had one to show off, but I don't. Anyway, but this was new and cool, and it took that weight that bullet had, because it's a 7.92. It's 8mm, which is bigger. It's a bigger bullet than what most of the world was using at that point. You come over here to America. Our new battle cartridge was the 30-06, which might do a video on that one next. But there's a couple things I need to get first. In Italy, you saw the 6.5 Carcano cartridge. In Japan, you saw the 6.5 Arisaka cartridge. They were all just a bit smaller. But you have this that shoots the same velocity with a heavier bullet, which made it very popular among hunters. So, as I mentioned earlier, in the time between World War I and World War II, the 1920s and 1930s, this caliber, because it was already being a military cartridge throughout the world, it was also seeing its way into the sportsman side of bullets and cartridges as well, because it travels straight and fast over a long distance. Like, what's that got to do with anything? Well, the cartridge was so massively produced that, yeah, the rifles may be slightly different, but the cartridges are even more different, because as we look into as we look at some of these things, the cartridge tells a story of its own. So let's fast forward. I know we're talking about in between the war, but let's fast forward to the end of the war. End of the war, the Third Reich collapsed. All their allies have essentially collapsed, and now you see pockets of new governments forming. You see Yugo, you see Romanian, you see all these other countries, and then half of Europe gets split down. In the 40s, the Soviets pretty much come in and take over, and I don't mean take over militarily. They were able to spring up their own governments, in some case militarily, but mostly they knew the right politicians to get these countries to become Soviet, and as a result, they all fell into the Soviet Union and created what we now call the Iron Curtain, or the Soviet bloc. But now you have a conundrum, too, because World War II showed that it was time for change. The bolt actions days were long gone. By the end of the war, you saw the development of the SKS, the G43, the SV41, and of course the love and beholded M1 Garand. And countries were already looking on ways to improve those. And in Egypt, you had the Hakim rifle, which was essentially a mix between an SKS and a G43, but it shot this beautiful cartridge. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, I bring this up because they actually had to remanufacture the ammunition, because the original blocks could not handle the pressure of some of the cartridges made for the bolt action because of the way the block was assembled. And a lot of people think, oh, that shouldn't be much difference. It makes a huge difference, because now they're not making these bullets in a wartime situation. They're not being made as aggressively. They're not being made as fast or as cheap, or in some cases, because even these bullets, well, I'll get into the reliability of the different type of surplus in a minute, but the Egyptian ammo runs hot anyway, as it is, just because I don't know if they were just trying to overcompensate for it being a lackluster rifle or whatever, but of all the Turkish ammunition I've shot, Egyptian is incredibly hot, but it's reliable. Like I know every one of these rounds are going to go off, and I know exactly what to expect. Some of these other ones, not so much. So with that said, let's go back to what I mentioned about the Soviet bloc and why that plays into the bullets. So the Third Reich, or the Soviet Union, comes in, they pretty much take over all these governments and stuff, and these governments are still producing bolt-action rifles. Well, along the way, and I believe in 1947, the world would change forever when the AK-47 being invented. And that changed everybody's mindset on what they thought was a battle rifle. In France, you see they had already started developing the Mauser 49, but it was quickly outdated because of that technology. So, what's all this got to do with Eastern Europe? Well, Eastern Europe made all this 8mm ammunition, and they're already under Soviet control, so they have access to any of Kalashnikov's designs or even Simonov's designs. And so what do? Well, Romania in particularly, they start manufacturing their heavy weapons and some of their battle rifles. They still continue carrying the VZ-24 in a lot of their police forces and stuff, but they start producing 8mm ammo out the wazoo, and which is kind of interesting to me because it's the most unreliable ammunition I've ever fired. From the years of 1972 to about 1980-ish, they manufactured the 8mm cartridge for a lot of heavy machine guns and or light machine guns and sniper rifles that would resemble those of their Soviet counterparts, like the Dragunov or a Svazda, but they were still getting surplus from other countries that were chambered in 8mm. Again, the 8mm cartridge was actually used on almost every front, minus I don't think the Americans used it as much as, like, Europeans pretty much had, every one of their rifles had some form of the 8mm Mauser in it. There was a version of the Brin made of it. There was a version of the Mannlicher rifles, the M1919 machine gun, the Maxim machine gun, which saw some use in World War II. All these rifles and machine guns still use this cartridge. And it wasn't just Germans, and it wasn't just these small satellite countries that made them. It was the big guys too. And they were sending all of this to these foreign countries for aid. Now, Soviets take over, and they find new ways to implement them. Like in Czechoslovakia, you see machine guns like the VZ-53, which was a light machine gun that was chambered in it, but was remarkably similar to the DPM. You have countries still fielding new experimental semi-automatic weapons with this. Let me look at my list real quick. A good example of that was the FN Model 49, which was a kind of a play on the Mas 49, but just Belgian, and it was chambered in 8mm. You had the Bershka machine gun, which was a Czechoslovakian heavy-duty machine gun, and they used those all the way up to the mid-70s. So you have all these countries, even though they're now Soviet and they're no longer really German, and you would expect them to be chambering their weapons in 7.62 by 54R, they all actually preferred the 8mm Mauser. I don't even know if preferred is the right word. It's ammunition that was already out there, was already there in country. It was one less thing they had to manufacture, especially as these countries are growing. So let's get to bullets themselves. So here I have 3, and we're going to talk about them. The first one I would like to talk about is the one I already brought up, the Egyptian ammunition, Turkish ammunition. I'm still trying to figure out the relationship there, because I know Egypt made a lot of ammunition. I know Turkey made a lot of bullets, but they have the same proof markings, like with the crescent moon and the hammer. They have a lot of similarities. But like I said, if you're looking for surplus ammunition that's consistent and hot, Egyptian. Same with the Greek. And the Greek is pretty much because the Greeks were British inspired, like there was a lot of a good example of British weaponry being converted to 8mm Mauser you could see in Greece. A lot of their Brens were that. A lot of just cheap rifles were manufactured, and they would use these. They would use the Greeks essentially as, I don't want to use the word guinea pig, but it's kind of what they would field their guns, their British designed guns chambered in 8mm in Greece. So of course you're going to have a lot of, it's not near, you can see kind of the difference here. This is more what you would think of now as a cartridge versus this. The brass is cleaner. It kind of resembles more of the 303 British, and even in the way the primer is set in there, it's pinned in instead of just pushed in. It's got a lot of similarities. The batch I have was manufactured from 1939 to 1940, and honestly, it's just as consistent as the Egyptian ammo. It doesn't kick nearly as hard, and it was actually pretty cheap. I paid probably $10 for 10 rounds, or $10 for 20 of these rounds, and overall pretty consistent. I haven't shot very many of them yet. I'm still trying to go through all this stuff. If I do go, or if I go to the range, I'll use this stuff, which I'll talk about that in a minute. But going back to the Romanian ammo, so the Romanian ammo it sucks because they made a shit ton of it, and you can find this stuff everywhere. But from my experience, it's very inconsistent as far as surplus rounds go, because I've seen this bullet hot. I have seen this variant underperform, and I've even seen it hang up. And then honestly, true story, I bought 300 rounds of this stuff off a buddy of mine years ago, and probably a third of them were either hang-ups or duds. And that's not including the ones that just stereotypical, like when you're building ammo, when you're mass producing ammo real fast, you're obviously going to have quality issues. So when you see when you fire one round and it's a good decent size boom, but then the next one is boom, but then the next one is boom, just very inadequate, and even if they may not even boom at all. A lot of these, actually I think I have one sitting here. This bullet right here, obviously I fired it and it never went off. It has since been, I've since emptied it, and I just use it as a wall hanger, but just for the safety factor. But I keep this as an example as to why I will never buy Romanian ammo again. No matter how cheap it gets, no matter how much it may be a sweet deal, I will never buy Romanian ammo again. But I think a lot of that is because, like I said, Romania was designing their 8mm to be fired out of machine guns and some sniper rifles. But I really don't think when you're firing this type of round through a machine gun, it's accuracy by volume. So I would ward anybody away from buying 8mm Romanian cartridges. But now, okay, I've complained a little bit about the surplus. What's the alternatives? Well, thankfully, the 8mm still has a place in the modern world. It is still considered one of the premier deer hunting cartridges. It's qualified to shoot everything from a deer to coyote to bear. And that's what I have here for modern cartridge. This is from PPU, Privy Parazan, which is a Yugoslavian company. And it is fantastic. I mean, it's reliable, it's consistent, it's still being manufactured. I believe Privy Parazan got their start making ammo to export to the Middle East for obvious reasons. Because if you're going to overpower your gun, you might as well get a better cartridge, which when the Hakim rifle was developed and they were having issues with this one, I can only imagine that the reason why they exported their bullets in the 50s was to field that rifle. Anywho, I step aside, but going back to the hunting purposes, this ammunition's cheaper. It's not near as cheap as buying surplus. You can buy a box of it for about $22 minus shipping. And it's extremely consistent. Like it's actually one of the few rounds that you can fire at the range because it's not full metal jacket, it's not steel core. I buy the soft tips just because, as much as I like hunting, I believe in being prepared for a worst case scenario. Soft tipped is a good. It's a poor man's hollow point. It'll do the job that you ask it to do, whether it be shooting an intruder or hitting a bear at 300 meters. And that's why from now on I will only buy Privy Parazan, but other companies make it too in modern day. Lancer, Nosley, Cellar Bullet, or Cellar Below, however you want to pronounce it. I'm from America, we pronounce things differently than all you guys in Europe. PMC, I believe, makes some in Winchester. I believe makes some as well. I know Federal used to. I haven't seen it in a long time, but those are all just plinking cartridges. If you want a good hunting, if you want a good pack-a-punch round, I suggest the PPU. And yeah, for $20 or for $22, it's a little pricey compared to what the surplus cost would be, which would be about $8 a box. Actually, here's the bucks for the Greek ammo here. But for the sake of consistency, because at least this stuff is brand new, you know where it's coming from. It's not been sitting in storage for 1,000 years or for 100 years or even 50 years, getting soaked in oil, dust, getting humidified essentially. Which I think that's what happened to these rounds. Is they sat in storage for so long, they just absorbed some moisture and maybe even got some oil stuck in them. I don't know. Again, never buying them again, just for that reason. And I'm sure, like everything else in the gun world, you all have different experiences with this ammunition as well. If you do, share your experience below and tell me what kind of rifle you have. It chambered in 8mm and your experience with this stuff, because everything I'm telling you right now as far as that goes, I have not personally experienced because I don't own a semi-automatic 8mm Mauser. I'd love to. If I could get my hands on a G3, I would be very happy. And I believe that is it for this episode. Again, thank you guys. Please take a moment, click the like button, subscribe, and share it, please. I believe that I'm having fun doing this. I believe you all are enjoying watching it. So as always, watch your six, keep your head on a swivel, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.